Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of July of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And telling the truth, according to my understanding of the situation, I believe that today we received one of the most important updates of 2024. So before we start discussion of this important update, according to my opinion, I would like to compare the 2023 year with 2024. We're not going to discuss details, number of losses. I would like just to understand how would you call the 2023 and how would you call the 2024. Obviously, we can call a year of 2023 as a year of Ukrainian counter-offensive operation that took place in Zaporozhye area where the Ukrainians were defeated. And obviously, everybody will remember this year as the Ukrainian greatest counter-offensive, reading quotes, of course. But as for 2024, we probably can use two titles for this year. The first title is F-16s, because every single month we are talking just about these F-16s, the number of F-16s, which countries are going to provide Ukraine F-16s, Netherlands, Denmark, the United States of America, Germany, Romania, who is going to send them. And of course, we can call a year of 2024 as a Patriot year. So the title might be F-16 or Patriot, because the Russians managed to destroy a significant number of this type of air defense system, and the Ukrainians were promised to receive significant number in the future, which will probably allow the Ukrainians to secure the sky above Ukraine. And this is the titles of 2024. From Ukrainian side. So what is the most important update that we received today? While talking about Ukraine, while talking about these F-16s, we completely forgot about the most important thing, what the Russians are going to do with all these F-16s and Patriot systems. And probably today we got the answer to this question. Let's take a look at this post. Today we receive a piece of news that the Russian airspace forces received this year's first batch of MiG-31 fighters that have undergone major repairs and modernization. After a series of ground and flight tests that confirmed the specified requirements, the aircraft were sent to their permanent bases. So, and according to information we have, the Russians received 10 machines of this type, and obviously the Russians received this type of aircraft right before the dates or the time when the Western countries promised to redeploy first F-16s on the territory of Ukraine. And today we continue receiving reports from Romania, where the NATO countries and Western countries have already accumulated significant number of aircrafts, reconnaissance crafts, support crafts, lots of machines of NATO types, Global Hawk, drones, Reapers, everything they have collected in this area with one purpose: to support NATO's F-16s that are about to be redeployed or deployed on the territory of Ukraine. The Russians are prepared, as you can see. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians are planning to use MiG-31 equipped with R-37 missile. At least this is the most modern, most powerful missile we know about. Maybe the Russians managed to improve this missile. The thing is that this missile is able to attack air-to-air targets within a distance of 300 kilometers. Obviously, the Russians have prepared a surprise for NATO countries. We know a lot about MiG-31. There are lots of information in the open source in Wikipedia, but as I understand, the Russians prepared something unique, something special. As they wrote to us in the post, it was these machines have undergone major repairs and modernization, and currently nobody knows for sure what kind of modernization this type of aircraft was undergone with. So let's take a look. But obviously we can make a conclusion that within the next few days the main battle for air superiority is going to begin. The Ukrainians and NATO countries are going to use F-16s for these purposes, and the Russians are planning to use completely upgraded and modernized MiG-31. And if the Ukrainians are able to bring down Russian MiG-31, then they will be able to establish complete air superiority above the territory of Ukraine, which will obviously change the game. Obviously not very fast, not today, not within a week, but in months, maybe in years, this will change the situation. Furthermore, if Ukraine is able to destroy and to establish complete control over the sky, then Western countries will realize that they found a solution, and they will send more and more F-16s of this model to improve and reinforce Ukrainian power in the sky. But if the Russians are able to defeat the Ukrainians with this MiG-31, then obviously it's going to become a time for negotiations, which obviously will be developed in complete Russian favor, and most likely the Ukrainians would be forced to follow every single Russian demand and requirement that was stated by Vladimir Putin, the president of Russian Federation. So let's see, July is going to be a decisive period of time where we're going to see the battle between Ukrainian F-16s and Russian MiG-31, as ones have already called the killers, F-16s killers. So let's discuss in details the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Bryansk area and Sumy region. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, during the previous few days, we received significant number of videos from the Ukrainian side of how they were FPV droning the Russian positions along the border. But as you can see, according to video, the Ukrainians mainly were attacking the Russian warehouses, energy facilities, communication equipment, radars, and different equipment that the Russians were using for supporting and communication between the groups, brigades, and forces along the border. And in this video, we can see another Russian energy facility that was damaged and destroyed by the Ukrainian FPV drone. In this video, in this episode, another energy facility. In this one, another one. Then we see fire anomalies. So basically, we can make a conclusion that mainly the Ukrainians during the previous week were focused just on communication, energy facilities, supply and support infrastructure, which confirms that either the Russians have concentrated significant forces and the Russians are about to launch a full-scale Sumy offensive operation, or the Ukrainians are planning to, let's say, ruin the Russian plans, or the Ukrainians are planning to start some sabotage operations along the border with the purpose just to show some media victory. Anyway, the situation is very interesting. Now let's move to Kharkiv direction. We haven't received anything important or interesting from Gluboka. There are still very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians control the farms, the Russians control the village itself, so both sides suffer losses. Now let's move to Volchansk. We have very interesting details and very interesting video. The Russian sources, more precisely the group of forces north, published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the bridge that the Ukrainians were using for redeployment their forces from one side of this water reservoir or river or lake to another. And this video, most likely we need to adjust the map in Ukrainian favor, and as you can see, based on this video, based on this geolocation, most likely the Ukrainians were planning to attack, or were trying to concentrate forces to attack the Russians from Staritsa, from behind of Staritsa, trying to maybe even encircle the Russians in this area. Also, we have another very interesting video from the forest that located to the east of Borgovatka and to the west of Volchansk. In this video, for example, we can see how the Russians were conducting reconnaissance operation, and when they discovered the positions of armed forces of Ukraine along the forest, they start bombing and attacking this territory with artillery and aviation. This is just a regular video, just a regular military routine. I published this video and shown this video to you just for one reason. If you remember, the group of forces north stated a lot of times in the past, during the previous days, about some phantom foothold on the Ukrainian side of Seversky Donetsk River. And we have added this bridgehead softly in between Prylipka and Bogrovatka because it fit one requirement, that the foothold was established to the east of the village. But based on this video, we can make a conclusion that maybe this is the territory that the Russians captured as a result of river crossing operation, and maybe this area is under complete Russian control. For now, we're not going to adjust the map or to change anything, but once again, summarizing details in the video, we can make a conclusion that maybe the Russians created a foothold here, because this is not like east of Bogrovatka, it's more northeast of Bogrovatka or the south of Ogurtsova, but who knows how the Russians describing the situation on the ground and which direction they prefer to use to describe this or that area. Now let's move to Volchansk itself. We have a lot of very interesting updates from the eastern part. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians published significant number of videos of how they were bombing the Ukrainians among the eastern buildings in the eastern streets of Volchansk itself. In this video we can see a series of artillery strikes and aviation strikes on Ukrainian positions, which confirms either the Russians are planning to begin a full-scale offensive operation in the eastern part with the purpose to defeat the Ukrainians completely and to force them to fall back, or the Ukrainians concentrated significant number of forces in this direction with the purpose to attack the Russians in a small bridgehead that located between eastern Volchansk and the village of Tikha itself. So we don't know for sure what exactly is happening, but obviously during the next 24 hours we're going to receive additional updates and everything is going to become clear to us. As for the southern part of the north of Volchansk, as we discussed in the previous updates, according to different mappers and according to geolocations we received from this territory, we have adjusted the map and we have added additional territory under complete Ukraine control. So let's wait for a few more days what is going to be next, but this situation is very interesting. Now let's move further and let's talk about Kupyansk direction. During the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything from this area. The Russians just published the video how they managed to discover another Ukraine multiple launch rocket system and destroy it as a result of counter-artillery duel. But comparing the numbers of updates that we received during the previous days and today, we can make a conclusion that currently there is operational pause or silence before storm. Most likely this is something like a silence before a storm, and most likely the Russians are about to begin new full-scale offensive operation in direction of the river by the name of Oskol. As we discussed in the previous updates, according to some Russian sources and pro-neutral mappers, the Russians captured the Makiivka village that located on the Russian side of Zhiribets River. During the day we haven't received any geolocations or any updates that can confirm this piece of news. Now let's move further in direction of Lyman Siversk. During the previous 24 hours the Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in this area, and the main reason of such a big activity, there are a few reasons. First of all, the Russians are trying to move in direction of Siversk. This is the first reason, so that's why they try to destroy the Ukrainian reinforcements and reserves. On the other hand, the Russians are trying to break Ukrainian plans to develop their offensive in Kreminna forest, because as for Kreminna, the Ukrainians continue advancing and continue attacking the Russian positions, trying to force the Russians to fall back towards Kreminna or towards Privilye or Shipilovka. So let's wait for more updates, but obviously we're going to continue receiving updates from this foothold as well. As for Chasiv Yar, Klishchiivka, New York, Toretsk, we got additional updates. As for Chasiv Yar itself, this territory has no value when talking about geolocations or any changes. The Russians are in deep operational pause, in deep regrouping, in deep accumulating and concentrating of forces before possible offensive during the next months even or weeks, because now the Russians are not able to do anything in this direction. The Ukrainians digging deeper in the central and the western part. The Russians are bombing Ukrainian positions, trying to find the key how to move further, but for now they are not ready. While the main Russian forces in Canal in the eastern part of Yasarea try to find the solution how to move further, some Russian groups are trying to clear the bridgehead on the Russian side of Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. During the previous 24 hours, we got a lot of videos of how the Russians were bombing Ukrainian positions, trying to destroy Ukrainian reinforcements, Ukrainian positions, Ukrainian reserves, while the rest of Russian groups were trying to clear the hill 225 that is located in the southwestern part of Klishchiivka. There are very heavy clashes, and most likely during the next few days, the Russians will clear this territory completely. And after that, the Russians will see everything in front of them. As for Toretsk, New York agglomeration, we got additional gains of armed forces of Russian Federation along the railways. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were FPV droning the Russians in this area. The video was published by 32nd Mechanized Brigade. We will not watch the video because there are casualties and violence with Russian soldiers. So that's why we will just adjust the map, but we have confirmations of additional Russian progress. As for the citadel in the central part of Toretsk agglomeration, about this territory, we have adjusted the map, as you can see, and we have colored this territory as an area covered with the fog of war. The thing is that during the previous day we got one report from the Russian sources where they were describing the situation in this area, and the Russians were saying that the Ukrainians, because they were forced to fall back from the citadel, now try to bomb this territory also with rockets, missiles and bombs and everything they have, with the purpose to ruin these buildings to ruins and not to allow the Russians to dig in deeper in this area. So once again, summarizing everything, according to some Ukrainian sources and Russian sources, in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing already Russian positions. All these buildings were geolocated here, but of course it's not enough of evidence to adjust the map. Maybe the author made a mistake, so that's why we are going to keep this area as an area covered with the fog of war until we get more clarifications. On the other hand, we started receiving updates of how the Russians were bombing the main citadel of Toretsk itself, the high-rise building area, the same high-rise building area as we used to see, as we can see in Volchansk or used to see in Krasnogorovka. And this is very important. The main problem of the Russians is that as soon as they reach another citadel, they need to spend sometimes months until they are able to capture another stronghold, another citadel. So now, as we can see, the Russians decided to do a little bit, to use another doctrine, another tactics. While the Russian forces are moving towards the citadel, which obviously can take months or even more, the Russian aerospace forces have already begun bombing this territory. And the thing is that by the time the Russians reach the citadel, most likely the citadel would be already reduced to ruins, or the number of buildings that Ukrainians would be able to use would be less than maybe 50 or 40%. So this is the situation with this, probably the most important, the last citadel of Toretsk. Now let's move in New York. We have some changes on the map. We have adjustment in the central part, and we have some adjustments in the south, in the base of New York offensive, where the Russians changed their direction. Currently, Russian forces are trying to attack towards the village of Alexandropol and Pantelemenivka. So this is very important operation. The Russians could attack these villages from the south, but the southern part is well fortified. So if the Russians attacked this way, most likely the Russians would be defeated and destroyed. But now the Russians have possibilities to attack this stronghold from the east, and this is exactly what they are doing. This will allow the Russians probably to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this direction without showing any resistance, or the Ukrainians would be encircled. Now let's move further to the western Avdiivka direction. We have some changes on map. The Russians continue movements along the railways between Ocheretina and Progress. According to information we have, which was provided by pro-Ukrainian mappers, the current distance between Russian positions and the first buildings of Progress is less and is around 500 meters, which obviously confirms and means that the clashes already started. Very interesting video we received from the main street of Yevgenievka. Let's take a look at this video. In this video we can see the Russian Son of Anarchy that was moving along the main road of Yevgenievka, but we will not watch the video till the end. The most important is geolocation, the direction of movement. The Russian soldier, the Russian Son of Anarchy, was under attack of Ukraine FPV drone, and this attack took place here. And according to this video, the Russian Son of Anarchy was moving in this part of Yevgenievka, which confirms most likely that the entire Yevgenievka was already captured by the Russians, because the Russian soldier was moving without being afraid of anything. He stopped just when he saw a FPV drone that was, let's say, flying above his head. Now let's move further in the southern direction. We got additional changes on the ground in the vicinity of Novoselovka-Persha. According to neutral mappers, the Russians did capture this school, and according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians captured another tree line. So the pincers around Novoselovka-Persha is getting stronger and stronger, and most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to intensify the use of storm battalions of former prisoners for unblocking operation. If you remember, just yesterday the Ukrainians conducted the first attempt of unblocking operation with the former prisoners of 47th Mechanized Brigade that were attached to 47th Mechanized Brigade. Currently we don't know for sure whether that operation was successful or not, but during the next days we're going to see more and more videos, more and more let's say updates with the use of these former prisoners that Ukrainians will use all over the entire line of combat contact. Now let's move further. We got additional updates in Krasnogorovka. The Russians are about to finish the battle for this stronghold. The distance from current edge positions that were geolocated and let's say this and the river Lazova itself is less than 700 meters. So it's already nothing for the Russians. The Ukrainians are doomed and the days of their presence there are numbered. We have reports about possible Ukrainian counterattack in the southwestern direction with the purpose to force some Russian reinforcements to send to the south, but let's wait for additional updates because I think that Ukrainians would retreat from this territory as soon as the Russians organized another counteroffensive. As for Ugledar, South Donetsk direction, we haven't received anything. Most likely there is operational pause or the silence before the storm. As for Staromayorskaya and Urozhaina, the Russians improved their positions between the villages, captured additional fortifications and the strongholds. Very interesting video we received from Zaporozhye direction, probably for the first time for a very long period of months. For example, in this video we can see a very big fire that covered Russian positions. I don't know how exactly the Ukrainians managed to do this, maybe with the use of significant number of artillery or they destroyed some warehouses, but very big Russian positions were covered with the fire, and maybe the Ukrainians also do have some plans regarding this direction, and that was like artillery preparation. Now they will try to do something. As for Kherson direction, we haven't received anything special, just a regular activity. The Russians were bombing the Ukrainians with the Lemur missiles, the Russians were bombing the Ukrainians with FABs, the Ukrainians suffer losses and show almost no resistance to the Russian forces. So this is the situation, and to finish the video, one important update from the border. 27 young men were captured by the Ukrainian border services during their attempts to escape Ukraine, during their attempt to escape mobilization and of course penalty, if you understand what I'm trying to say. They were captured. Most likely they would be mobilized in the very near future, and most likely they would be sent to the line of combat contact within a month and a half. This is exactly the period of time for any military exercises of recently mobilized Ukrainian soldiers. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.